chainsaw is such a wreck right now. Using it for, I think the last time I was using it, we were cutting out stumps and I was plunging in the ground and cutting roots. It's nasty.
Flies again.
Fired up and running good.
Good.
Just like always.
What do you got there?
This is a log stand attachment for a PV. So you can roll the log over and stand it up off the ground and chop them. I figured I'd give it a try, see how it does. Well, I think we're ready. Let's go do it. Well, today I figured we'd talk about fallen trees, how to get a tree to go where you want it to go and make sure it doesn't go somewhere else. So, if you've been with our channel for a long time, we've cleared a ton of trees around this property, around this cabin. I'm by no means an expert, but when I follow these safety guidelines, this gets me a tree right where I want it to be. So I'll kind of walk you through what I personally do when I'm falling a tree. Just remember, falling trees is super dangerous. The safer that you can be when you're doing it, the better. Chaps are important, gloves, helmet, because you might have branches or widowmakers trying to come down at you. We're gonna be falling a standing dead behind us today. There's a bunch of dead branches up top, so a helmet is definitely a must in this scenario. So let's talk about setting up our tree to be cut. So first step, selecting our tree. This one's dead. We know that we want it to come down. So the very first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna look at the tree, look at my surroundings, and see where I have available to fall the tree, which way it's leaning, and gonna wanna naturally go. So let's do that real quick. The first thing I do is see where the tree is leaning, and I just use this. I just simply use an axe as a plumb bob, and I'll hold it up in line with the tree, sight down that, and I can tell you that the tree is leaning this way. So I'll kind of walk around the tree, do that a few times, and find out exactly where that tree wants to go naturally. In this particular scenario, the tree actually is leaning, is going to want to go exactly where I want it to go, so that's the easy one. The slope of your land can kind of mess with your vision as far as where you feel that tree is leaning. Usually you have a pretty good idea, but it can mess with you a little bit. Using the old standard plumb bob method, just make sure that you are 100% accurate on where that tree is going to go. We've looked at this tree. It's naturally wanting to go towards this other tree over here. And I wanted to fall this tree uphill anyways, so I'm going to swing it just a little bit to the right where those clump of stumps are up there. So I'm basically going to have to navigate a couple of obstacles. I've got a stump right over here. If I fall that tree on that stump, it could potentially bucket up in the air and back at me. So I don't want to be too far this way. On the other side over there, you see the little hill? That's our septic system. I also don't want to drop it on the septic system. So I'm going to thread the needle and I'm going to drop it right in between on that pile of stumps back there. So the next thing I want to know is how far is that tree going to reach? It looks 150, 200 feet tall, but there's a good way to know. Like if you have a good run to fall something, but there's a building behind it, and you want to make sure it's not going to reach that, this is the method that I use for seeing where that tree is roughly going to fall in length. I'm just going to use my axe for this trick as well. Simply going to hold my arm out at a right angle to my body with the handle of the axe up in the air, and I'm going to sight at the top of that axe handle, and I see the top of that tree up there. And when those are lined up, that's roughly where that tree will land. As long as I get my hinge set properly and follow this tree right down the trajectory I want to, I should land with the end of it right in those trees there.
Do you get nervous when you're falling trees?
No, not typically. Unless they're leaning really hard and I'm trying to pull them in a direction they don't want to go. Typically fallen trees, I'm not nervous at all, no. Now we know where the tree naturally wants to go. We know where we want to put it. There's no conflicts with that. So now the next thing is I'm gonna start cutting on the tree, and I'm gonna cut a bird's beak into the tree. Now, it's very important that you set that up correctly, the bird's beak, and then as you cut into the back side of it, that center meat is called the hinge. It's very important that you set that up correctly to get the tree to go where you want it to go, because if you don't, it can come loose and you'll be running. So I've started cutting across the tree with a flat cut. The next thing I want to see is make sure that 90 degrees from where my saw blade is where this tree is going to go. So I'm going to look at that real quick and make any adjustments that I need to. So I'm pretty close to where I want to go. I'm going to swing it just a hair more this way. One important thing to remember is just let your saw do the work. Don't be like rounding inside of your cut on this. You need a flat inside of that hinge. So I'm going to let the saw just curl around a little bit more to swing my tree this way and have it a little bit more lined up, and we'll be right there. Perfect. A good rule is roughly about a third of the way through the tree with your bird's beak. If you've cut halfway through the tree, you've probably gone a bit too far. So you want the hinge to be in the fattest part of that tree. So usually roughly about a third of the way through gives you a good ratio. Gives you roughly 80% of the way cut through the tree. If you go too far, then you risk compromising your hinge. So the next thing I'm gonna do, now that I got this lined up where I wanna be, is I need to cut the opening of the mouth here. Now if I try to do that by just eyeballing it and cutting it down in, I'm never gonna get it lined up. What I do is I line my saw up with the end of this cut here, and I'm gonna let it just follow around, and it'll follow around and it'll find the other side over there where I want it to be. Now I'm just going to double check where I'm headed. Okay. So I'm just a scotch to the right, still where I want it to be, a little bit closer to the stump. I think I'm still going to just barely brush that, so I think we're good to go. So now I'm going to start my back cut into this tree. What's referred to as the hinge wood is the middle holding wood right here. So if I come in and I cut too far in, and let's say the tree's being stubborn and doesn't want to go on its own, if I cut too far in and I cut through my hinge, I lose all control of this tree and where it's going to go. So when I'm doing my back cut, I'm paying close attention on both sides to make sure that I'm not cutting in through one of my hinges, because then it could swing and do all kinds of crazy stuff. So it's very important. Just like a literal hinge only lets things go one way, the same thing is on this tree. So if I cut through my hinge, game over.
So you said it would barely brush that that stump, and that's exactly what it did.
Kiss the edge of it, just like I said.
Yeah, literally just right off the edge there. So
now, I'm not sure if the top busted off. Let's go look and see if it's roughly where we thought it was going to land.
okay. So it starts to go this way. There's another piece of it here. You can see a piece of it there.
Yeah, so I'm guessing if it hadn't all busted out, we would be, just a little bit short of our trees. We also swing this way a little bit,
Yeah.
but I'm guessing somewhere right around here. So about 10 foot short of our mark that we had. Oh, that's okay. The other thing of note on this, we're using right angles. We're also falling on a hill. It gets you pretty close though. I'm not sure how long this one's been dead for. Might be a little bit punky in a few spots, but overall we'll get a lot of good usable. Overall, we'll get a lot of good usable firewood out of it though. All right. Let's go follow another one that's not quite coming up as much of a hill and see if we can get a little closer to pinpointing it. We have a whole bunch of standing dead. All of our white firs are dying. I think it's just that it's been drier and drier and drier in the area that we live, and there's not as much water for them to live on. They're a very wet tree when you cut into them when they're living. Hold a ton of moisture, and I think it's just drying out enough that these guys are slowly dying. So we got a bunch of matchsticks sticking up in the air if a fire ever comes through, so we've been trying to bring them down, and every year there's a couple more that pop up, so never ending supply of firewood.
So the next ones he's going to take down are in this little trio right here. I think there's 3 right in there, so he'll take down one of those next. So I really know nothing about this process except for what I've watched Robert do. This one, just from like my line of sight, it almost looks like the bottom is kind of leaning downhill slightly and then towards the creek, but the top kind of comes in it circles, like not circles, but it kind of leans back up towards the hillside. So we'll see what Robert's gonna do with this one. What's your assessment on this one?
It's definitely, it comes up and curls towards the creek and then straightens out. Not a crazy lean any which way. I think we can cut it, and then worst case scenario, we pound some wedges and get it to go where we want it, which is out here where I'm cutting firewood.
We definitely don't want to fall our tree across the creek because that would make it substantially harder to make it into firewood. So hopefully this goes where we want it to go. I've never seen Robert have a tree get away from him, and I've seen him cut down a lot of trees. So I have faith in him. At the same time, I stay way far away when he's cutting down the trees. So I'm confident in his abilities, but I just stay way back and out of the way. So I'm also not getting in his way and making him worry about anything other than what he's working on.
So I think what I want to do with this one is I'm going to cut my wedge, make sure where I'm headed on my bearing, and I'm going to see if I can put a little X on the ground and follow that tree right there. So I don't even need to mark it. The end of this tree is going to kiss the edge of that tree right there. So on this particular tree, perfect example, I'm cutting on it. We know there was weight leaning kind of back against it, and I cut into it, but if I kept cutting until it started to fall, I would have cut through my hinge. So in this scenario, I stop at the minimum depth of my hinge that I want. I'm just gonna simply pound it the rest of the way over. It's primed and ready to fall at any minute. I just gotta go give it a little persuasion. All right, into the trees right here. Close enough.
Good job.
I said a little persuasion. That thing was leaning back a little harder than it looked, so I had to double wedge it to get enough fatness to shove it over.
Yeah, you got it.
Got it. So this is probably a good visual representation of if you control your hinge, you control where the tree goes.
We'll get centered. Yep.
This one will look a little skewed because as we came down, we kissed the edge of that stump and it skipped over, but that was the line we were headed. One thing I forgot to mention is the angle that you cut for your bird's mouth. You want to make sure you cut a steep enough angle in there that the tree doesn't start to fall and close, hit, and then stop. Because if you've got a tree that's hung up like that, it's super dangerous. So you want it to be well on its way to falling before this gap closes. So as I said, I'm no professional. I've just been dropping a lot of trees as we've been clearing this 12 acres we got here. So those are some tips and tricks I've picked over the years. Just wanting to be safe in my own journey and researching. That's what I came across, and it's proved very effective to me. Kept me safe, kept my family safe. So that is how I fall a tree. Just a reminder, it's super dangerous to fall trees, especially if you're not comfortable with it. So just keep that in mind. At one time I didn't know anything about falling trees either. So if you're a professional and you fall trees for a living, please feel free to chime in and tips, tricks, suggestions that you find when you're falling trees. Thanks so much. Hope you guys have a great night. Sawdust in my teeth.
Ate a little bit of sawdust.
Yeah.
Huh?
Well, we just dropped 3 big trees, so we got some firewood cutting to do.
Yeah, we do. Now all the fun starts.
I'm sweating already, but now the real fun begins. So we're trying to tarp our burn pile. So we got some rain coming. We want to make sure this stays fairly dry under there so we can light it off this winter. Cats are helping us now, of course.
Oh, they're not.
Dee Dee says they're not.
Off of there, you're gonna rip that.
What you doing, Jasper?
I don't think you're cute right now.
Oh, they're gonna have a blast under there.
Oh, hold it up on the top.
That'll be nice. I'll just flip it up in the air, trim it, reset it, flip it, keep my chain out of the dirt, keep it sharper for longer. So yeah, I think that'll work well.
Nice.
My hook came loose.